Ladies and gentlemen, we are live. So welcome back. We're continuing on our housing work, and we are going to pivot to supportive housing, to our housing for our developmentally disabled. And Susan, we welcome you. Introduce yourself. You have met everybody?
Yes, in one form or another. However, I'm not sure everyone hears that we're of the Vermont Developmental Disabilities Council and what we do. So I'm just going to spend a couple minutes.
Great. And I just wanted to say before you start, Keisha is joining us online. She's remote. So,
Hi.
So she's here. So
Okay.
take it
Go
away.
ahead.
The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Susan Aronoff. I am the policy senior planner, policy analyst for the Vermont Developmental Disabilities Council. I'm going to distribute cards to you. I'm a state employee. And what I want to say at the outset of this testimony is that if you or any of your constituents have questions related to disabilities of any type, developmental, brain injury, whatever, please reach out to me. If I can't answer the question, I will try to find someone who can. That said, I am a state employee. As of right now, all 50 states and 6 territories have developmental disability councils. We're entirely federally funded. We were created by the Developmental Disabilities Act. Our main purpose is to bring people with developmental disabilities and their family members into policy discussions and connect them with the people, whether that's school boards or the legislature, places where decisions are made about, we like to say, where people live, work, learn, and play. So pretty much everything in cradle to grave. And so I put on the screen and I'll just scroll through it. Our membership by law has to be 60% people with developmental disabilities and their family members. And this is a little dated. We haven't updated it since June 2024. My apologies. But anyway, just like the legislature, our council is made up of people from around the state. And so our chair, Anastasia Douglas, is from Washington County. We have 2 members who happen to be vice chairs from Caledonia County, Justin Thunderberg, Michelle Chan. We have a couple members from up in the northwest corner of the state, Amanda Bianchi. Is a woman with a developmental disability who lives with her aging father. Swanton and Kelly Bordeaux on mom. Then we have members in Chittenden County, some of whom I think you've met recently, Senator Chittenden, and members in Orange. I think we have Collins here in Chelsea, but you know what? She is now South Royalton, Senator Clarkson, and you recently met Collins when she was here in the State House, and Kate Daly is from your neck of the woods, and I think expecting her to be here in the State House later in the session. I'll introduce you. So anyway, Randy Lazat has, as of this, we were waiting for him to be appointed. He has since been appointed, and he's a really interesting member from St. Albans, in that he's a self-advocate who also works for the counseling center there as a peer advocate, and he's married to a woman with a developmental disability, and he has developmental disability, and they have a great life story, and they can provide testimony about all kinds of things from the marriage penalty to,
right. But we're focused now
on housing. So on housing, and the other thing I'm going to pass out to you all is our members drive our platform. I am just staff, and our platform changes every 5 years. Top of mind for folks on our platform this year is housing. And what we're really interested in is service supported housing. And kind of picking up on where Maura left off, what the legislature did a couple of years ago in Act 186 of 2022 was the legislature launched 3 planning grants. And as you might have heard during the Budget Adjustment Act, 2 of the planning grants, they're up and running. The 3rd planning grant just needs $2.8 million to be completed, and that's in Burlington. So that's the planning grants. The other thing that same act did was it launched a study to answer the big question of how many units of service supported housing do we need in Vermont?
That is the
So-
big question.
That is a big question. So you guys, thank you, had the foresight to answer this question. This is the report that you commissioned, that our office, put out, that Allison Hart wrote, in 2023. And the answer then was 602 units. So I just call it 600. We need 600 units of service supported housing. We're not going to get there with these one-offs and these planning grants. What we need now is a plan. And so the good news is that Vermont applied for and received the status to an accelerator grant to have our Vermont Housing and Conservation Board work with our Agency of Human Services and our Medicaid agency and our Department of Disabilities together. It didn't come with money, but they're going to be going to Washington together and they're going to be receiving technical assistance together. It's all in the interest of developing this service supported housing. So the language that I've presented to you would ask these same state level players, they'd all be paid for the work. So per diems are not necessarily exception of a couple few that I added. But ask these state level players to develop the plan of how do we get to the 600 and come back to you in time for next session with some kind of actionable language towards that plan. The other thing that this group is tasked with doing, and this might be more doable in time for next session, but really important, is what the planning grants have shown is that there's some obstacles to the development of this housing. And they're like the self-imposed obstacles. They're not obstacles in federal law. They are obstacles that exist in state law. So we have like this 2-person rule that's making it very expensive to develop the service supported housing. That's a rule that can be changed within the Agency of Human Services, but someone's got to do it. We've also discovered that as much as coordinated entry works and is necessary, it's an obstacle for the group of people that I'm talking about, the people with high support needs, to ever reach that category because they do not become homeless. They go to nursing homes and they don't get out. They go to emergency rooms and they don't get out. They're in wheelchairs. They're on electronic equipment. They have daily needs such that they do not become homeless. So they don't go into the coordinated entry chute. So they never rise to the top. So we need to solve that. This team would be charged. I didn't want to call out the 2-person rule or coordinate entry, but everyone knows it. I mean, the people in that room would know it, and they would work on a way to address that, not to dilute coordinate entry, but to create the kind of parity that should exist for this group. What I say in my testimony was really different about this group of people. These are adults with disabilities who are living with other adults with disabilities, mostly their parents who are aging. This is an entire generation. We closed Brandon in 1993. We made a promise then to provide community housing. We have not. What we used was a very, at the time, innovative model called shared living. It's essentially adult foster care. And for as well as it worked for many, it never worked really well for people with high support needs. That said, even for those it's working for, we're losing 25% of our shared living providers. And this is not home share.
They're aging out too.
They're aging out, and Airbnb and other things are just very attractive things to do if you happen to have extra real estate. Not that many people do anymore. So that idea that once existed in Vermont were people who were they were described as property rich and cash poor, and so supporting adults with disabilities in their homes was an attractive source of income.
Yeah, there are more options for them now too.
More options, and really since COVID, shared living providers became 24/7 care providers, and that's really honestly not what they signed up for. But the workforce, that's a whole other bill. But we could build as much housing as we want until we solve the workforce crisis for this home and community-based workforce. We're not going to be able to support people in their homes the way people want to age in place. Everyone wants that. We need the work. So anyway, the good news is Vermont has positioned itself with this accelerator grant to take the next step. But I think that the legislature can kind of harness that energy and say, bring us a plan, bring us proposals to remove these obstacles. And then you'll also see there's a request for a position. So when I drafted the language, it was unclear if the governor's budgets in Act 186 from 2022. There was also a limited service position to develop this kind of residential housing. It was a 3-year position that went to Dale. So when I drafted the language, we didn't know what the governor was going to do with that. Turns out that Dale is making that a permanent position itself, but it's expanding the scope. It's not going to serve just people with developmental disabilities. It will serve all the populations the Department of Disabilities, Aging, and Independent Living serves. What we've discovered through the pilot grant project, but really through the language that the legislature's put language in VHCB's appropriation in recent years that requires it to prioritize developing housing for people with disabilities and several other groups, people who are homeless, refugees, farm workers, I'm not leaving someone out. What we've discovered is that VHCB does not have a staff person position to work with the developers.
That ring.
I feel like I looked at the window immediately to see
Finally,
that
some-
bird feeder not full anymore.
Yes, and I just thought I turned it off when I sat down, but apparently I didn't. So anyway, the position now would not be going to Dale. We'd be going to VHCB, and it's not limited. It wouldn't be limited to just people with intellectual developmental disabilities, but to developing housing for all of the populations that the legislature has prioritized VHCB do that work for. And VHCB would be in a better position to testify about, the cost of that position and the parameters of that position. But they're going to be very involved with this accelerator grant. They're one of the key players. And in our meetings with the VHCB, when Brandon closed, they developed over 800 units of this type of housing in a decade. So if harnessed and channeled in the right way, I think VHCB is the entity that knows how to develop housing, knows how to work with developers. Dale is doing the best it can and could work with the people who need the services, but a position like this would be better in VHCB than Dale. That's the lesson we just.
Just for clarity, you said Brandon closed, they created 800 units, but you need 600 units. Now, you need 600 units more than the 800 that were produced back.
In 1993.
So were those actual housing units or are those the shared living opportunities?
So those were mixed. Thank you for the question. My understanding, and the staff from VHB could talk to this better. My understanding is that they did create at the time what were then called developmental homes, some pure residences and group homes, which is something that we're really missing in Vermont now. And then a lot of the staff from Brandon and nearby similar institution, they themselves became shared living providers, but VHCB was involved in the development of housing at least 800 people.
So the 800, do the 800 still exist? So you need
Well, these are
1,300 total? I'm just trying to follow the thread.
Well, these would have been 800 people in 1993. So like between 1993 and 2003. So the 600 that we're talking about now are adults anywhere in their 20s, 30s, and 40s who weren't even alive then.
I think that's additional. And
Yes.
you are asking, so the ask is to create this position under the VHCB umbrella
Yes.
for
To focus on developing the housing for the priority populations that have been attached to their appropriation.
and to incorporate into some of the VHCB housing work,
Yes.
supportive housing for this population. And the ask at the moment is to, what do you need? What's that position coming in at?
So we put in $100,000 as a placeholder, and that was for the position and the fringe, but that would be better, and that's not in my testimony, that would be better I gave that to Representative Haley. But I think that would be a better discussion with VHCP. But what we have learned.
Oh, I
working with
thought you had a specific ad. I mean, you're asking for this position to be created in VHCB.
Yes,
And, so it'll be around $100,000.
yes, and the actual, what the position would do, the language that I put there was the language that described the position at Dale. In talking with the staff at VHCB and just in working with the staff at VHCB to try to connect parents and families to projects going on, like for instance, in Middlebury, it's so clear that they need to start at the earlier stage, like even before the ideas coming to VHCB. So that's what this position, they would be in a better position to describe the actual tasks of this position. And we thought because they have so many, their priority populations have different types of needs. We didn't want to limit it to just orphans.
Got it. And have you, VHCB has agreed to doing this?
We're in discussions, but yes,
Okay.
they would like the position. What the position would do is what we're discussing. And what they would discuss with me.
Great.
But the existence of the accelerator grant, their VHCB is going to play a key role in that.
Sure.
And then I wanted to say that the planning team goes a little bit beyond the partner to the grant in that I suggested including the office of the treasurer, and I've not spoken to anyone, Ashlyn or anyone else from the office of the treasurer. But we know that this housing, the creation of these 600 units is going to require different types of financing. In other states, read the report. New Jersey, the governor set up a special fund. That's why we want to have the governor, the treasurer's office involved. We know that there are private public partnerships possible as well. So we want to be able to explore all of these things and put them into it.
Well, and with the accelerator partners, you have all those resources available, and they all know where all the resources that are available for this population.
Yes.
Thank you. This is great. And I know it's sort of an evolving discussion. We will have VHCB send us either a letter or come in and testify for 15 minutes on what this looks like. So who do we turn to for the language on this? Because we have a placeholder for it in our bill,
So the plan.
but I need language
Yes.
and I need a specific ask.
Okay, so the plan language would be me and the position language would be Polly. And I will.
So if you and Polly could coordinate on that language and get it to Cam, I will put you all together on an email chain because our committee is going to need
Okay.
that for our work.
Thank you, and thank you for your time, and thank you, I want to thank you for, I should have said this during my testimony, those policy changes that you made last year. What Senator Hinsdale said to us, when we were talking about planning grants, is you need a pipeline, you need a process, you can't do these one-offs. So
Right.
you created us, put us in the priority grouping for VHCB, added us to VHIP, and those two things alone have just made a world of difference.
So
Thank you for
We're
this.
so glad, as Thomas noted earlier, it is so good to see how our policy work in the past. We have to be cheerleaders for our great work, and our cheerleaders, not with us, but we're all cheerleaders for our work.
And I
We all
think the opportunity of this accelerator with a little push from the legislature is it's going to bring the state level partners who need to partner together.
all the state level partners together. This is great.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you very much. That's great. So we'll put everybody together. So, Moreau, you walked in just on time.
Wow.
And even a little early.
I thought it was early, yeah, but
So come join us. We're coming. It's well, and thank you. First of all, I want to just begin by thanking you for changing your, liberating your birthday, which is today. And so you can do whatever you want now. and being able to accommodate us because we, as you know, our time frame is so tight on getting
Yes.
our housing, economic development and labor bills out. So we are going to pivot to what I understand is a really terrific proposal and one that we need to weigh. We have gotten Frank Coffey. I don't know if you've seen Frank's comparison sheet, but I'll send it to you if you haven't seen it. But he has
Okay, I have seen
your
that.
proposal. I'll send it here. So he sent it to all of us last night.
Okay. Oh, it's like a side by side of the different.
Of all three,
right.
TIF, Spark, and what
Okay.
he's calling HIT, which. So, without further ado, let's start. I don't know if you know all of us. So,
I think I do know who everyone is, but
We know each other, but is today your birthday?
no, Tuesday.
next Tuesday when it's
So when he was scheduled to come in on this,
Let's build some homes.
right, let's go.
Agreed.
And you are,
Tom Chittenden, we've known each other for years.
right, and, Keisha Ron Hinsdale, Allison Clarkson, who's honored to represent Moreau's hometown, Heartland, Vermont, Windsor District.
We were in fun. I said,
Favorite's, Rutland County.
let's see something. Let's see.
So welcome, Moreau.
Thank you. I am excited to be here. I do have a PowerPoint that might be
Yeah,
helpful.
let's-
That's like,
I just sent you a link.
okay. I thought I had the link and you see me trying to join?
No, I don't, but that's because I'm not there right now. I do now.
Great.
Okay.
Early, I turn your speaker.
So you'll, yeah.
So, and Moreau, Keisha is, remote today, so
Okay.
she is behind you.
Close.
I'm gonna turn your speaker. I'm gonna turn your speaker. in.
That's it.
So.
How about now?
You.
You got it. Okay, great. Good. That's it. All right, well, let me share the screen here to.
And we have Moreau's proposal. I know we have it.
There we go. There we go. Okay, thank you for that. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us in. We appreciate it. We know how busy you are. We know you got, I saw how full your agenda is, so we really appreciate having a little time to share this concept.
Would you
Love
really
that.
thank Phil Burroughs next time you see him, because he's away at a conference, so it's given us a whole little bit of extra time today without having to be on the floor right now.
We certainly appreciate that we've had the Let's Build Homes sign up on the door even before we've been in. Let's Build Homes is a new coalition we really publicly launched just a little over a month ago. I'm happy to say we've grown quite quickly and now have over just about 700 individuals and organizations that have signed on to this coalition to build more homes from all over the state. We really come from a place of feeling that there is a scarcity of homes in Vermont that is driving not just housing and affordability, which is shocking, the levels of inaffordability we have, but also now rippling through really just about all of our other economic and social problems, whether you're talking about the healthcare challenges, where there was this major report last summer saying that the way to fix healthcare is to build more homes, or the Ed Fund and the challenges that has had growing and keeping up with the needs. Yeah, all of our workforce issues, a lot of it comes back to the scarcity of homes. And Let's Build Homes wants to change that by working at the statewide level through conversations like this, but also at the regional, local levels as well. So I will say, we do have a number of things that we're working on right out of the box. This, what I'm here to talk to you about today, is really the thing I think we have the most sort of unique perspective on. We've put some real effort into this housing infrastructure initiative. I will just say we have some letter on the budget adjustment bill supporting additional continued public investment in permanently affordable housing. We certainly think the appeals process needs a hard look and very serious change. And we do have some ideas, if there is, and Simon Ruth and I have had the conversation. I do think the landmark bill you got passed last spring, perhaps there's some opportunity for clarifications and updates of that. But really what I'm here to talk to you about is this housing infrastructure initiative.
And just to put it, just to pin on the other two things, I hope you are also presenting in Senate Natural Resources because you have to Act 250 stuff. And also just on appeals, one of the things I'm hoping to include in our bill, and we'll discuss this on Tuesday, is accelerating the due date for the appeals work that the LRB we have in that bill that you referenced. We asked for an appeals review, and because we definitely want to reform the appeals process, and that's due to us at the moment in January, February, and we're asking actually that they move up that time frame to have it due November 1st.
Great.
Because we definitely want to be addressing appeals next session.
Excellent. Yes, and to be clear, Let's Go Homes wants to be a voice at these tables for a long time to come. We think there's a lot of work to do to get where we need to be on.
Not all happening.
And not included by that list by any means. The housing infrastructure initiative, I think an important thing to understand about it, this is not a solution for all of the challenges in building housing right now. I think ironically, we have this consensus that we need to build more homes. We have this report that a lot of people I think have bought into from VHFA. This has happened in a moment when it is probably harder to build homes right now than at any point in the last 20 years, with the interest rates being what they are, with the construction costs having really spiked since the pandemic. This proposal really doesn't do anything about those issues, which are major challenges to all projects right now. What it does do, though, is address a third major cost area, which is the cost of public infrastructure, which on many projects is one that can take a project from being financially viable to it no longer penciling out. And I should say, I'm giving this testimony as the executive chair of Let's Build Homes, this new coalition, but I also say this having spent 15 years as an affordable housing developer before I was elected mayor. And then when I served as mayor, we focused on housing throughout those 12 years, saw a lot of these projects come forward that had this infrastructure gap. And, and I see this now too. I'm consulting on a couple of active housing projects in Vermont, and this is an issue that comes up again and again. And you'll see a couple specifics of examples of this as I get into these slides. Here's just a sense of why is this a problem? Why is the public infrastructure a problem? Well, we have very limited public infrastructure in Vermont. We have, these are stats from ANR, about 200 villages lacking community wastewater disposal systems, 100 don't even have public water systems. This is a quote from the ANR website that many communities have explored making these investments in the past, but they haven't been able to do it for one cost reason or another. The league, so my colleague from the league come in, did a survey of their members last fall, which found that, of the 88 municipalities that responded, 35 have active infrastructure projects going on. They've hustled, they've gotten the federal money they can, the state money they can, and they still have some, significant gaps. So that's just, and I think it's important to say, like, HIT won't solve all those gaps either. But it shows we have limited tools to address infrastructure out there, and this would create a new one.
May I just put him to a sort of silly question, but you've gone from being LBH to HIT, and just tell me what the difference is.
Sorry. LBH is for Let's Build Homes. That's the organization. HIT is this housing infrastructure initiative that is the
What's the T stand?
They took it out of the initiative.
So I'm new at this.
No, that's okay. I just need to know what they are.
Lobbying and up but housing infrastructure is the HI, and then initiative is the T in initiative.
Okay, got it. Okay, and then the second point I have is in our housing proposals at the moment from the governor, we also have the infrastructure sustainability money that has been proposed that the municipal bond bank will be managing. So just also think we have at the moment $9.1 million, which is inadequate for this need, but is a start. And we may think of adding to that. I know the other body is as well, because that is part of just So to your point, that could be a piece of funding some of the gaps.
Yes, absolutely. And we appreciate and
Kind of
support
put some of
that.
these pieces together that as we look at them.
Great.
going
No, I think that's super helpful. What I would say about HIT is, it has the chance, depending on how it's used and how many projects pursue it. My sense is that over time, and I'm going to show you a few examples that, show how just these couple projects could result in a couple $1 million, several $1 million of new housing infrastructure investment. Ultimately, I think if HIT were to be approved and used, it would dwarf this $9 million investment in infrastructure. And the beauty of it is it would be the legislature creating this new tool for building infrastructure without having to write a check out of the general fund, without municipalities having to write new checks, without burdening really in any way existing taxpayers. It creates this major new source for housing. And let me get into a little, and so that's a big part of the reason. That is the reason for doing this. I had the stats a moment ago about the places that lack public infrastructure. I would say even places that have the best public infrastructure in Vermont, like Burlington, often when a major housing project comes forward, you find that for housing at any scale to be built, there need to be substantial upgrades to that infrastructure. So this, even in places where you have a good foundation, this can be a useful tool to actually getting more houses built.
And some of that infrastructure is aged and can't deal with any new development in the infill and all the spaces that are existing in their village and downtowns. Such as
Very well.
like a town you know well.
Exactly. And I believe another town in your jurisdiction, Woodstock, my understanding is they alone have $20+ million in infrastructure projects that are under development.
Well, I'm particularly with things that have been privately owned that have been inadequately invested in.
So let me try to run through quickly how this program would work to get to any detailed questions you might have. So this is not a tool that can be used everywhere. It would be only in geographically eligible areas, which builds off of the work you guys did with Act 250 reform last year. I'll get into a little detail about that. It would only be for projects that are mostly housing projects. It wouldn't just be for any economic development project. I think it's one thing that distinguishes this from some of the other proposals that are out there. None of these projects would happen without municipalities approving them and signing off on them. Every HIT project would require an infrastructure agreement between a builder and a municipality. It would allow for contiguous projects, the multiple projects to kind of be working together to get infrastructure funded in a certain area. So I've got some slides on each of these. So here are the geographic eligible areas. Tier 1 on the Act 250 maps would be eligible.
Both A and B.
Both A and B. The areas that are currently temporarily exempt would be eligible. And then there is in Vermont statute, this concept of an existing settlement. And this, in part because we want to make sure that this is something that is a tool available to communities throughout the state, not just in the bigger communities. We are proposing the use of this in existing settlements and within a half a mile.
Some of those exist in tier 2.
Some of them exist in tier 2, exactly. Eligible costs. This is basically, you should think of this in this sense. This is similar to TIF. We use actually the TIF definition of eligible costs. We have in the language that we propose added to that brownfield remediation and flood resiliency measures as well. So, a lot of these flood recovery efforts that we're talking about or flood resiliency efforts really require a whole new section of a village, of a town to have public infrastructure serving it. This could be a very flexible tool for that kind of flood recovery or even flood anticipation effort. This looks, those of you who know, and I know you all do know TIF, this part of HIT functions like TIF in that basically a new project, a new increment that is generated by it, 80% of it for up to a period of 20 years could be invested in paying off the debt of this public infrastructure. Interestingly, though, that for reasons that are get to the fact that this is different than a TIF district, whatever the maximum is, if you were to approve this 80% maximum, that is likely to be over time, because the debt will be kind of locked in at the beginning of a project. You might start out where 80% of the increment is needed for servicing the debt on the infrastructure. As the, taxes tend to go up over time, but the payments are locked in at the beginning of the project. Over time, over that 20-year period, very likely, depending on the project, that 80% figure would be dropping each year, and a higher percentage of the new increment would be going to that fund each year. Happy to answer questions on that once we get through if there are more on that. Here's another important detail. TIF, as you know it today, the only way to, the main way, at least, that debt to make TIF investments is made is through, certainly everyone I was involved in Burlington, you would be TIF debt would be backed by a general obligation of the municipality. The authority for borrowing that we're proposing would open up other forms of borrowing, and it would even do what 32 states do, which is to allow the developers to go out and incur the debt. They pay off that debt through essentially tax abatements of this rebates of the money that they are paying in. But they're really the one on the hook for the debt, and they're at risk for it. The voters, the municipality is not at risk for it. That's something we tried to do in the projects I was involved in Burlington, is really put developers on the hook. This creates the possibility of that being really just structured in who takes out the debt. And I think it's an interesting refinement, or it's an interesting element of the way we propose it here. And again, it's one that many other states allow. There would be oversight and accountability in a number of ways. Again, these infrastructure agreements would need to be approved by the municipality, the legislative body of the municipality.
But not by the public, but not by the general public voting, by the municipal body voting.
General obligation bonding would still be an option if municipalities, for whatever reason, they thought that was the best way to pursue a certain project. And in those cases, the rules would still be in there. If if you want a general obligation bond backstopping this, you got to go to the voters a couple times. But this gives the option to structure in a way that avoids that. BEPC would provide oversight. We have tried to, I think this could be much simplified BEPC oversight from what we see with TIF districts today, because the whole thing is much, much simpler. And because it is much simpler, I do think this is something that many municipalities that have not been able to pursue TIF districts would be able to access. I know you had a question about that earlier in the session, Senator. It also would allow eligible costs to, if a municipality wanted to retain the league or the RPC to provide technical assistance, that would be an allowable cost for this HIT debt, and creates, I think, the resources can give them a municipality that needs some assistance. They would be able to get that through this structure.
Just one thing, when you're done with this, I would like if you'd be kind of to send this presentation.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
we can post for our public and private.
We could, absolutely. And any other follow-up that you'd like coming out of this. So that's basically the summary of what the bill is. Let me show you a couple, or I plan next, at least if you're ready, is to show a couple examples of how this would work in practice. Here's a project from Summit Properties in Middlebury. You may have seen this project in the news.
We have had seat in.
Great. So maybe something I wasn't clear on just from reading the newspaper articles is, what they have the funding for and what they're building now is what they are calling the core village that's outlined in blue there. They were able to put together $6 million in infrastructure funding from the somewhat unique circumstances of this project coming out of the pandemic. They got a bunch of federal money for that. They have some very patient Middlebury endowment money that's been invested there. So that's what they're moving forward on right now, is that core village with 80 homes. They have the potential, they have the permits to build another 104 homes in the area that's outside of the blue. And that, however, that will require an additional $2.5 million in infrastructure investments in the roads and the pipes. And that is one of the gaps that they have on the project right now, is they don't have a funding source for that. And they're not going to be able to recreate the same funding sources that got the first part funded. KIT would address that in that the 104 new homes would have something that would generate something like if it gets built, it will generate $575,000 annually in new property tax revenue. If they were able to capture only like 30% of that to put it into the investment, that would solve that $2.5 million gap. This just sort of shows what this is an interesting image in that it may make clear what might not be so clear. What the town of Middlebury will get if this full project is built is they will end up owning the area in green and blue there, these new pieces of public infrastructure that would be paid for here. So this tool helps projects happen. It expands the public infrastructure of the municipality, what is owned by the municipality. The yellow is parks that, I guess, the way they do it in Middlebury, the developer will continue to probably be responsible for those parks. Here's to show a smaller project and how this might be impactful as well.
I know that, yes, Erica was just in touch with me about this project, and it was just on our Upper Valley morning. It was just featured anyway.
Yeah, so Jonah Richard.
This is West Fairley.
Yes, well, I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah. I know. He has a number of different projects going on. Yeah. This is just one of them. Village Ventures is the name of the company, and this shows that they've got.
This is what we just
a number of different things.
Yeah.
We're just looking at one of them, the Denison, 26 proposed 26 unit mixed income property, $6.5 million in total development costs. They've got about $250,000 in infrastructure costs. This would be right now, that's a hole in the pro forma. They don't know how they're going to pay for that $250,000 challenge. If they were able to capture some of the additional debt for some time, they could easily pay for that gap. So hopefully that lays out how small and large this becomes a potential tool for advancing housing projects. This is this has similar numbers on another one of the Village Venture projects, and a third. So this will be in the record that you have. A final thing to open up for any questions you have. I think knowing that TIF has been a let's say polarizing policy in this building at times, I think it is important to point out that while this has certain similarities with TIF, it is different than TIF as well. It's really not TIF. Again, this is focused on housing, not these other investments that TIF allows. And I think why that's important is that I think there's broad consensus I'm feeling right now that we are not building anywhere near enough housing as to meet our needs. Here's how the Vermont Housing Finance Agency needs assessment maps that out. This is the numbers that Let's Build Homes is focused on. We for a long period of time, we've been building homes at half the rate or less than what we need to fully meet our housing needs. And you can see that that's a change also in that housing needs assessment. If you compare housing production growth now to what it was in the 80s, we're at like a third of what we were doing in terms of growth in the 80s. So
we have been underbuilding.
Yes.
So I mean, it's a collective impact that we are feeling at this moment. But if we had been building what we needed to be building every year since 1990, we would be in a very different place.
Completely agree.
And I don't want to lay the the lack of housing on TIF because TIF has enabled a ton of housing. So I'm a big fan of TIFs too, and I'm a big fan of the economic development it also supports. But I
Yes.
think this is a great additional tool that we need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I was in no way suggesting
Yeah.
that it was TIF's fault that we hadn't built out housing. But I do
Good.
think we've had debates about the but forecast. And what I'm saying is this really kind of moves us away from having to worry about this debate over is this adding to the grand list or not? I think we all agree we're not building enough homes and
Exactly.
So-
We just need to get on it.
this here are some other distinctions that maybe in the interest of time I won't go through each one.
No,
but-
you're fine.
Okay, well, so I think legitimate critiques of TIF is that the way these TIF districts work, the districts capture incremental background growth in a way that I understand how some people look at that. It makes it a very powerful tool, but I understand how some people look at that and say you're really diverting money from the ed fund for a long period of time. This doesn't have any of that background diversion because this is
Or that
focused.
baggage of misunderstanding, we
Yeah.
might call it.
I appreciate you framing it that way, Senator.
I mean, we're not, anyway, that's a discussion for another.
Yes. That's off the table because this is focused on you're only capturing your increment from the project that is being built, not the sort of ancillary projects. And you just don't have to have that debate, even though I appreciate that. I think many people in the room might be on my side of that debate thinking there's a benefit. I know not everyone sees it that way.
Yeah, we're mayor of a town that benefited from two TIFs.
The other points I think we largely hit on so far, other than let me say again that next to last bullet, because debt would be one-time debt, and because taxes almost, as we know with debt and taxes, they tend to go up over time. The percentage of increment that is being captured to service that one-time debt will go down as the taxes go up.
Yeah.
And we really, I think, hit on everything else so far. So, and then this is just the last point that the other time I testified on the House side, this was some new numbers to some folks. Even if you sort of accept the JFOs, what I would characterize sort of the worst case scenario analysis of TIF, that it is diverting money from the ed fund, even if you kind of accept that analysis and don't debate, get into the debate of whether it would have happened or not. I think it is striking to see that in that worst case scenario, the impact on the ed fund is currently for the current year, I think it's analyzed at $6.5 million a year in tax expenditures. That is much smaller than some of our other policy choices that also kind of expend money out of the ed fund, whether that's through current use, which actually I guess it is an $80 million impact, 60 million on the ed fund, 20 million of the general fund if it's the current use impact. And then increment sensitization is approximately 160 million. So given the urgency for more housing, given that this actually, I think everyone agrees over time would grow the grand list, I think even from that perspective, this is worthy of serious consideration. I'll pause there. Thank you for giving me a chance to go through all that.
Have you finished your presentation?
I have, yes.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time and I'm just, before we get into questions, I'd just love to know what your, well, no, I'm going to wait. Questions. We all have questions, I'm sure, Tom.
I really like this idea. I think it's a great thing and it's exactly what we should be doing. So I like that the eligible costs. I do want to talk about brownfield remediations, but my impression is that this will be a lot less administratively because it seems very parcel specific. So you're not going to need to manage the overall TIF, which can sometimes contain hundreds and hundreds of parcels. So that I like, but I did hear you say something about adjacent parcels. So I'm just worried about any complexity with drawing geographic boundaries as opposed to just assessing how much money's coming in. And I am assuming there's going to be some sort of density minimums. And I'd be curious if in your mind that would be set by or approved by ultimately said determined if it meets the qualifications by VEPSI or the municipality or combination thereof. But I think density is going to be essential to be eligible for these hits that you are so likely calling them. And the notion of the developer holding the debt is absolutely great. I also want to just grab onto, because as I had read about this before, I hadn't really realized what I think you're illustrating, which is that the amount that would actually divert from the ed fund, and I'm on your thinking with that, which it's really just building up our grant list so that it strengthens the ed fund, but that's the debate for the other day. I'm not seeing, from my experience in TIF management in South Burlington, where you really were capturing the entire incremental amount. I'm envisioning these projects to only require a portion of the incremental amount. Do you see them wanting to spend everything above and beyond what the original appraised value is for these infrastructure projects?
I think there are certainly, so the examples we show both would take like, I think it's 30% or under 50% of the new increment would be sufficient to finance those improvements. I do think there will be projects that have bigger infrastructure needs and that will need the full 80% at first before that one-time effect grows. So
would VEPSI be the one to determine?
Yeah, look, that, I'd love to tag onto that. So
Yes.
do you see, because you need a home for this,
Mhm.
and do you envision VEPSI, have you brought Jessica into these discussions, and do you see VEPSI maybe overseeing these projects? Because somebody
Yeah.
needs to oversee them.
Yeah, no, it's, we have talked about VEPSI. We do see them being the agency to provide oversight here. Again, we hope it is a simpler process than the TIF district administration currently, and Jessica agrees that it's in the conversation I had with her. I don't want to speak for her, but that seemed like a realistic goal based on that conversation. I actually think some of this we may be able to simplify to the degree that it can be almost like an administrative review on some of these smaller projects. In that, it's sort of black and white. Are you meeting the rules of the program or not? But yes, that fundamentally, VEPSI would provide oversight. You would need to establish upfront how much of the increment do you need for this debt. And that would be, it would be a one-time proved at the beginning. And that's why I'm saying we're likely to decline over time.
And each project might have a different amount.
You really do have a situation where the infrastructure need can vary dramatically from project to project. Some might have just, as you saw there, that, when you're talking about these in village, in downtown Fairleigh, the public infrastructure costs you're hooking up to a line that's right there. The costs are fairly modest. If you're building a new development in a geographically eligible area where we've said we want growth, you have to build a whole new road network. You have to build a whole new set of pipes. It's a very different thing. So I would encourage a high maximum, and some projects will need that, but many will not.
Really quick, the other question, which I think is of great interest to my colleagues across the table as well, and I know you have experience with it, dirty dirt. As much as we're going to allow for a brownfield remediation to be an eligible cost, would you not impress upon these senators the importance of actually reducing some of the dirty dirt requirements so we're not spending as much money moving dirt around the state?
So, if we're building a long list of things to talk about another day, I think this is a very important policy matter that has not gotten enough attention. I tried during my time as mayor to engage this, and there was, when Governor.
You had a lot of dirt you had to move.
We had a lot of dirt we had to move, and some of it was not any dirtier than most of the other dirt in the state, and yet by state law needed to be treated as hazardous waste, which is
This is an issue. Yeah,
massively.
definitely going to be addressed, and not in this committee, but definitely we're calling the question on it being addressed elsewhere. Sure. David, you have some.
I was just wondering if you can compare and contrast HIT to Spark.
they have a lot of similarities.
Maybe the differences.
As I understand the differences, I think HIT is more focused in terms of being focused on housing. And I believe it may be more focused in terms of geographic eligibility as well. We really tried to build off the work you did with the Act 250 maps, in large part. I don't think Spark has the same kind of geographic targeting.
This will help bigger developers and more developed cities, more so than Spark, is my impression.
Well, you have,
That doesn't mean we don't need to do it.
yeah, but you're exempted. I was encouraged to see you have the exempted sites as well. The ones
Yes.
that, what did you call existing? What are they called?
Existing settlements, yes.
Thank you, existing settlements, which would mean that would open up tier two and some of our village
Yes.
centers there, which would be really, because to me, one of the reasons I have loved and embraced project-based TIFs for, since Westford came to us with that idea, was that we really need something that's scalable.
Yeah,
And I see this as scalable for housing.
I agree. I think this is something that scalable, at least in a number of ways, probably, but here's one way I've been thinking about it is one constraint on infrastructure and projects moving forward and is municipalities have only so much capacity. There's only so much that municipal staff can do, and they're pulled in many different directions. This would be a very entrepreneurial program. I think this
Yeah.
would what we would result in is around the state builders, large and small. And I think I'm going to present to the Rural Caucus next week. I think this will, and talking to Joan or Richard, I think this in some really quite small communities, this will be an important tool. I think you'll have builders going to municipalities saying, we're prepared to do the heavy lifting here in terms of planning out something that actually will expand the infrastructure and expand housing in this community. We need your sign off and engagement, but a lot of the work, and even as we're saying, even the debt can be kind of taken on by the builder. So I think in that sense, this is a kind of bottom up proposal. It doesn't just require government initiative. This can be pushed by individual builders.
So as we move it forward,
Yes.
a new program, lots to establish and lots of work to be done to get it going. I guess the action steps for the immediate action steps, do you have language that you've been developing with John Gray?
We do. We have, as of Tuesday, we now actually have legislative language, and it's
To establish it or to establish the entire thing?
we're
gonna see John, so just-
honestly, I've done limited personal time on the language since it just came out, but it was based off, we provided an outline and yes.
But you got the answer I needed
Yeah.
for our committee, which is they need to know. We are working on this language. John Gray has got this. We'll see this next week. And so I just wanted so you view this, I guess what I want to hear you say is that you view this as actionable and taking step one this year to move it forward. We can establish it.
I think this is, as we say in the infrastructure field, I think this is pretty shovel ready at this point. This is
Right.
real language that you could dig into and finalize. And I think this is a meaningful, very meaningful pro-housing step the legislature could take this year at a time when I think the public is,
Right.
you guys are better assessing the public than me at this point, but I think we need further action on housing this year. And I think this is one of the more impactful things that is ready to go.
When I hear shovel ready, I like to know, have other states done this?
Yeah,
So-
what did you base it on? That was going to be one of my earlier questions. I pulled
I'm
that.
still on board. I mean,
Virtually every state, my understanding is 49 of the 50 states have
Something.
TIF legislation in some ways, and 32 of those states have this kind of builder, they call it pay-as-you-go model where the developer can take out the TIF. So this has been tailored to the unique Vermont context with the tier one maps and whatnot, but this is this is firmly within the established precedent of how states try to support projects.
Let's get the shovel in the ground.
Yeah, I can tell it's changed, right?
I'm
So-
intrigued by it.
Yeah,
I'm just sort of thinking through it, or what could go wrong?
So, so one thing that can go wrong with financing like this is, and we have seen it, I think, it's something that I will say as the mayor of Burlington, I worked hard to insulate us against, is you can't have situations where the municipality goes out and builds the infrastructure and then the taxes, that there's something gets delayed with the project and the taxes, takes a while for the taxes to catch up with the investment that's been made. That's one of the reasons why, one of the things that I like about this structure where the developer can be the one to take out the TIF is if that happens, in that case, it's the developer is the one that then can't meet the debt payments, not the municipality. So that's, I see that as one of the biggest risks with TIF, and with the existing TIF legislation, we had to do a bunch of things on the back end. Like these development agreements that I negotiated with several big projects, they tried to bake in that protection for the municipality. This sort of puts it right in the structure of the bill, which is one thing I like about it. You know, what else could go wrong? I mean, I guess something that could go wrong is we might not see a huge jump in housing starts on the back end of this because of the broader challenges going
I
on,
mean, the inflation,
because of
Tariff.
construction costs, because of
workforce,
high interest rates. This won't solve that. So
Right.
it's possible that we don't.
but it's a thing
See.
that we as a state can do, who are not in the business of development.
Exactly.
We can enable development, and this, to the best of our ability, we have to look at all the opportunities to enable and get out of the way. Enable thoughtful.
Well,
So-
I guess I think about, for example, that the auditor's office has raised all kinds of issues. That
Yeah.
Some folks agree with, some they do not. And I'm just wondering how an auditor would deal with this as a concept and how it would be audited and what issues would be wisely developed. And it might be a conversation that those people that are advocating this might want to have, if not with our auditor's office, with an auditor taking it from the standpoint of how do you do a government, a government audit, if you will, of that, and what kinds of issues it would likely arise.
Yeah, I think you, Randy, raised an excellent point, and I think one of the things that would be great for you to do is have a conversation with Doug and Tim. And send, I don't know if they've seen it, if you've sent this to them, but given their interest, I think that.
Just facial expressions, you don't have to have.
Yeah,
written-
no,
Yeah.
I mean, but there are, they're state partners.
Sure.
The other thing I guess I'd say wearing our economic development hat is this doesn't, one of the things I love about TIF is it's multi-use. It's housing and economic development in our downtowns and village centers. And so I don't want us to abandon improving and retooling and TIF. I think this sounds like a terrific tool for housing. I just don't want us to give up on TIF. And
One thing I didn't hammer on that I just want to make sure is clear.
Yeah.
This does anticipate mixed use. It would allow mixed
and
use.
that was my, that, you know where I'm going. It's like that Windsor County. But, that is for me what the big plus of TIF is. It embraces mixed use and embraces economic development and enables it in our downtowns. I'm glad to have heard that this also is mixed use, because that's so essential for many of our housing projects, is that they have retail or a business below. Well, retail is business, but manufacturing or business and or retail in our core service in the first floor, first or second floor,
Totally agree.
and then more housing up above. David,
Just
you had a thought?
Well, I'm good. Okay.
Well,
on that point, just to be, a project would qualify if it's 50% housing. So certainly
that's great.
something that had a whole ground floor or even a couple floors of a 4-unit project, a 4-level project, you would qualify. And I agree with you, Senator, that pure economic development project that Emerald Housing are certainly worthy as well. Perhaps
I mean, they go
Perhaps
ahead.
this makes them more likely in the future if we have these sort of smaller project-based tips work on housing and show the power of it. Maybe in the future,
Yeah, they
sometimes.
go hand in.
I'm not against the 50% threshold, but I would stress the importance of density minimums, because I could see this hitting headwinds if there wasn't some assurance that this was really going to build that high density housing in our tier 1, tier 2Bs, where I think that's where we need high density,
Yeah.
multi-unit family
And-
housing. I'd hate for this to be, sprawling suburban, whatever you want.
No,
to describe it.
and-
Higher
Less
density.
efficient,
Oh,
higher density.
completely agree. And that, I mean, this is a proposal they're bringing to us. We get to put our lens on it and anything we want to add. Sorry, but the minute you let it go,
Yeah,
it
of
becomes
course.
ours to play with. So it is, we will be able to have that impact on this conversation. So we're
Maybe you should build housing that people want and can afford.
I think
Yeah.
high density housing.
That maybe
oh my God,
Yeah.
there are a lot of people who would love that. Thank you. This is just terrific and really appreciate if you please send that to
I will do that right away.
Heidi so that we can all see it and reference it going forward. I just so thank you and happy birthday on Tuesday. I hope you now have some liberated time that you're going to be able to enjoy. To tie a bow on our Friday together. I have, last night I reworked the elements of our housing pieces. You've seen the list, I've incorporated them both. Cam and I worked on that a bit. Yesterday, Cam is going to have a draft of everything we've pretty much talked about, and I have some sense of support, at least to look at more thoughtfully. Tuesday we'll walk through that. That's what we're going to do on Tuesday. And we may not get through it all, but the list I send you today may not be fully complete. If there's something missing that we talked about, please let me know.
I'm expecting Tuesday to have a very short time at committee. We're going to the BAA together, and then I expect more discussion. So just send you.
I realize, which is sadly why we had to punt the conversation we were going to have on rent on mobile homes. We are going to meet. Hopefully, we'll be done by 10:30, and we BAA. I mean, I'm living in hope, and luckily Cam is flexible. But if we could go 10:30 to 12. So I guess the other question I would ask us is to think, given that the floor may go late on Tuesday, if we can build in flexibility to the first part of our lunchtime, we might go to 12:15 just in case. We have caucus at 12:20, and I don't know what your caucus is. You caucus on Tuesday also.
may or may not.
Okay, so we start caucus at 12:20. So if we could, I don't know if we're going to need it. We may be done and all of that.
Yeah, so how about we leave it that, we have a.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Ron. I really appreciate it.
I love the phrase. Let's build homes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have news at the point that we do have it, but it's
Okay.
every week.
Anyway, I would just put this, as you guys are talking about that, if we could have as flexible time, maybe a little bit more, given floor time is going. So with that, I think we're done. Let's hear something else.
Two last points, Senator Brock. I completely agree. We need all sorts of housing, not just high density housing. I just in this building, I'm thinking that's where there's going to
Yeah.
be more support.
And that's-
for
yeah.
diversions.
And we're for more public money. So thank you, Heidi.